However, history would give us a different interpretation of this, or an alternative interpretation, right? And this would be the error, or what scholars have come to refer to as the error of American exceptionalism, right? And this has to do with how history has dispelled the idea of American exceptionalism, right? So don't get me wrong here. It's still very popular in some segments of the United States for people to uphold the idea of American exceptionalism, right? However, many scholars now point or would now say, well, that's an old way of thinking about the United States because now we are in a new era where we prefer the idea of the error of American exceptionalism. This has to do with history and a couple of important moments in our history that dispel the idea that we are in fact exempt from other nations' problems, or that we are in fact not so very, very special. And that would be, for example, losing the Vietnam War. Right. And this is what Bella was worried about at the end of his essay, that we had to do the right thing here, right? And losing the war was a great blow to the national psyche. We're still sort of kind of getting over that. The way, for example, the way that we treated Vietnam veterans when they came back was shameful. We shunned them, we ignored them, we called them murderers, and we as a nation took out our anger at losing the war on these veterans, right? More recently, the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and before that, the bombing in Oklahoma City, right? These attacks really damaged the idea that the United States was exempt from such actions. That how could these horrible things happen on American soil? This was just an unthinkable set of events that really changed the way that we thought about ourselves in relationship to other people in the world. And then, of course, the ongoing unwinnable wars in the Middle East have continually damaged, if you will, this idea of American exceptionalism. Right, the previous administrations have felt like we could go in there and clean up what the Russians couldn't do, or what those nations themselves couldn't do, and we still have troops in the Middle East. And those of you in this class who are under the age of 30, which is almost all of you, except maybe a couple of the TAs, right? You have lived in an era of American history that has always been at war, right? So that it becomes natural almost to you to think of the Americans as having Americans in the Middle East being at war. It's just something which is something you grow up with, right? But of course, the fact that we are mired in these uh, entanglements there uh, demonstrate that we are perhaps not exceptional, right? That we can't simply go in there and win the war. And finally, I would argue that the escalation of coronavirus cases and deaths in the U.S., right, currently the most of any other country, as reported, is a kind of blow to our ego, certainly to our current administration's ego. Okay, so why do many Americans still believe in the idea of American exceptionalism? Well, one of the important reasons has to do with this idea of cultural hegemony. Cultural hegemony is the formulation of an Italian philosopher named Antonio Gramsci, whose life was built around fomenting rebellion in northern Italy. And in his political work and activism work, he continually came upon this problem that the people who were being oppressed, people who were being exploited by large aristocratic corporations, by the state, that they were reluctant to rise up in rebellion. And Gramsci thought, well, this is a very interesting problem, that people who are oppressed, people who are being oppressed, don't seem to want to throw off their oppressors. Why is this? And Gramsci theorized that he recognized there were two ways that the state or powerful institutions could control you. One was through the barrel of a gun, through force, and the other one was through a strategy of getting you to accept your exploitation and maybe even to participate in it. And so Gramsci elaborated this idea of cultural hegemony, which is the idea that dominant ideas and beliefs in society are promoted by the dominant class as a way to maintain control. So rather than using violence or force, which of course can happen, the dominant classes actually use ideas and beliefs as a way to get you to be complacent, if you will. Well, so are there other examples of cultural hegemonic ideas today? Well, one of them I would say would be that still this American exceptional idea, right? That the U.S. is the best nation in the world. This is a culturally hegemonic idea, right? It's pervasive, it is commonsensical, is regarded as normal, natural, obvious, and true. The idea in our society that the acquisition of material goods equals happiness, right? The idea that you have to have the latest iteration of the iPhone, right, and to make you happy, right, or to drive or to strive to drive a Tesla will bring you happiness, right? This is an idea that we've adopted from previous generations in this culture that is just obvious that whoever has the most stuff wins, right? Culturally hegemonic idea. It may not necessarily be true, right? Um, the idea that democracy is the best form of government for everyone. Like, why? Why do you think you believe that democracy is the best form of government for everybody? Well, because it's reinforced by everything in our culture. Everything, right? And to say otherwise puts you in the minority and in some places great danger, right? Here's one that you might not like, which is the idea that a college education always results in economic success. Well, if you've talked to anybody who graduated in 2008 as the recession was hitting, you know that they're still trying to come out of it. If this coronavirus thing goes on beyond October, college education may not result in economic success, but in this culture, we have been raised to say, well, you've got to get a college education if you want to get ahead, right? Why? Well, because it's obvious, because it's true, because it's commonsensical. Here's a more recent one, that socialism is unacceptable for the United States, right? Um, the idea, for example, that universal health care is un-American, right? That this is somehow inimical to the way that we as Americans run our lives, right? This is a culturally hegemonic idea that that we cannot have any kind of socialist policies because they work against what's really American, right? So cultural hegemony then becomes a powerful tool, if you will, for us to think about the kinds of given beliefs, stereotypes, expectations about other people, about Asians and Asian Americans that we need to guard against, right? So cultural hegemony is an important tool that we have, right? Um, American civil religion is a culturally hegemonic idea. We could argue about that. Okay. Um,